We're good to go.
We're good to go.
Let me tell them.
So David, you're here now?
Yeah.
Hey, David, thanks for stepping in and doing this presentation. I appreciate it.
Sure.
We're gonna get going in a couple minutes, okay, David?
Okay. Sounds good. Y'all hear me good?
Good. Good morning. Welcome to February 16th, 2024, Alabama Chapter ASSP meeting. Thank you, JSU student section, for inviting us to your wonderful campus here for this meeting. Dr. Dana Inglesby would like to say a few words before we start.
Yeah, I'm going to keep it really brief so the meeting can proceed, but on behalf of the Department of Applied Engineering, are so pleased that ASSP has decided to have their meeting here. I want to welcome all of you. We have some alumni, of course, we have students, which is great, and then local industry folks, safety professionals. Welcome to all of you. As you know, we do have a bachelor's program in occupational safety and health management. We have about 70 students in that program now. So send students our way. I have more than enough jobs for those students. My biggest need is students in the pipeline. So thank you again for being here, and really looking forward to a great meeting. Thanks.
Thank you. And we have Dr. David Carpenter. He works with Integrity Company up in the Florence area in Alabama. He's an electrical expert. So he's going to do a presentation today. David, it's all yours.
Okay. Real quick, can everybody hear me well? Okay, just making sure. We're going to be talking about electrical incidents, investigations, and audits today. And there's actually a standard found for this in the NFPA standards. Just to give you a little bit about background, I started out as an apprentice electrician and now have a PhD in electrical engineering. I have served on codes and panels, actually writing codes and standards for the past 30 years. So that experience has kind of carried me over into where I'm at today. I've also written 4 textbooks, and those all have to do with motors, electric motors, motor controls, semiconductors, instrumentation, and so forth. And they're all a part of the system. I presently serve on the industrial machine standard for NFPA, also in the field evaluations standard as well. So what we're going to be looking at today, just to get you started, is 921. NFPA 921 is the guide for fire and explosion investigations. I do want to give you a warning that some of the pictures you see today may be pretty graphic. I'll try to let you know they're coming because we're going to show you accidents that have actually happened, and then how we investigate them, how you should investigate them. There's actually a standard, and that's what this standard is, on how to investigate any incident that you have, whether it's a fatality or not a fatality, whether it's a small incident or a large one. So let's go with the standards we're going to be looking at today. 70E actually is a standard that requires audits. You're required to have.
Hey, David.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Are you showing the presentation now?
Yes.
Okay, you need to share your screen.
Okay.
Like we had before.
All right. Yeah, that would help, wouldn't it? Let me find it to share. Here we go. We ought to be there in a minute.
Okay, there we go.
You got it? Great.
Yes.
All right. We should be. Are you on there at large? Oh, me. Hold on just a minute.
Okay, we're seeing your side. We're seeing the presenter version.
Yeah, I'm going to get out of that here. I'm going to hide it in a minute. I've already done this once, and I must have missed. I forgot to put that share in there.
Okay, we're good
Now,
now.
can you see it all now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So 921 is the standard that we're going to be talking about. And along with it is 70E. So 70E actually points you to 921 and how to make this presentation, or how to make an investigation. And if you look at 70B, which has newly been a standard, now we've actually, at the Institute, we've been teaching a program and now offering actually certifications for what we call QEW. That's a qualified electrical worker. And in that is maintenance most of the time, or construction. So 70B has got the definitions of how to actually carry out the maintenance, how often the motor has to be maintained, and all the testing that has to be done with that on a yearly basis. Now, keep in mind, all of these standards that you're looking at right now, in fact, all of the electrical standards, which is the National Electrical Code, the one that I serve on, industrial machines, the ultimate goal of all of those standards are to provide protection or to prevent shock and fire hazards. That's the total goal of them. And when you have these standards, the reason they're so popular is because they're consensus standards. These are not standards that a group decides they want to do it. These are actually professionals from all over the nation. And then we actually have other countries that are involved in this now, because we have so many industrial machines in the US that are European, for example. And I actually have written a book that for the US Army, actually for the Corps of Engineers, in which we harmonize the US standards with the European standards, because the nomenclature is different. And that's why I spent so much time in Europe during those days trying to do that. So let's get back to the investigations. I've told you a little bit about the standards, why they're written and how they're written. If you know all of that, you know the ultimate goal and the ultimate purpose. So when we're doing an incident investigation, when something happens, 70E.110.3J says that has to be a part of our electrical safety program, that we will do investigations, and we have a procedure or a principle by which we go by. Well, here's the problem I see. In fact, we're doing a combustible dust plant right now on our consulting side. And in that, as we've learned about their electrical safety program, they don't have any way to investigate. They don't know what to do if they were to have a problem. And they have had a problem, and it was just a real disarray for them. And this has really sent a message to them. And now we've come to find out that other electrical safety programs, they don't have any way in their safety program to how to mitigate any kind of incident that could happen. Here's another thing. It's going to help the production. It's going to help everything about that system if we report even the little incidences that happen. For example, in combustible dust, if a worker is going under a machine and he's getting shocked because of static electricity, static is very known to cause combustible dust explosions. In fact, we've got one of our clients right now. It's exactly what happened. The workers would not even get around the machine to work on it because it kept shocking them. Eventually, they had and blew up the machine and the whole process. In fact, they blew up 2 of them. And it really became a problem for them. So we want to see this more and more put into safety programs. And like I said, they're really not there. So there's a couple of things you want to look at when you're looking at an investigation or an audit, either one, but particularly an investigation. First of all instances of shock, fire, or burn have to be reported and must be reported. Whether it's a miss, a near miss, injury, or a fatality, they've got to be reported. And you want to make an investigation of that. I'm going to show you how to make that investigation, what all has to go into that investigation in a few minutes. I'm going to show you how to recognize things with wire and on the human body, what happens to it when electricity goes through the human body. So there's two hazard levels. When you're making an investigation, you're going to see an immediate hazard or a potential hazard. Now, they're broke down in several others of those, and I don't have the time today to go into them, but primarily there's immediate and a potential hazard. Questions that you ask in the interview. When you're interviewing somebody that's been in an incident, maybe they've gotten shocked, maybe they've gotten burned, or maybe you have had a fatality, or maybe you had a machine catch on fire. Everybody has known about this. In fact, every fatality that I've ever investigated, every one of them, somebody got shocked before and didn't tell anybody about it. That's kind of the tragedy, that some workers are actually afraid to say anything much. How to report the results of the investigation are found in accordance with NFPA 70E and 921. The electrical audits are required one every year for the workers and what's actually going on in the field. It's called a field electrical audit. Is required every year. The electrical safety program is required to be audited every 3 years, and every 5 years, you have to do what's called an arc flash analysis, or the new term for that is energy innocent analysis. That has to be done every 5 years. That's part of what we do. We do arc flash studies and other studies for the U.S. government and for a lot of the larger facilities. A risk assessment analysis or procedure must be a part of the electrical safety plan, but we always want to check that when you're doing an investigation. What are the procedures? Are the workers aware of the procedures? Did they violate the procedure? What happened that the procedure wasn't met that would have prevented this incident? How do you determine the hazard level, immediate or potential? We've talked about that just a little bit before, but let me say this. When you're talking to the people who are involved with it, you're going to have certain questions that we're going to give you, or the standard's actually going to give you, in which to ask those questions from. Now, keep in mind, these standards are written by people who are professionals in this field. The standard that I sit on, we have over 50 people that represent electricians, they represent engineers, they represent safety folks, they represent NEMA, which is the National Electrical Manufacturers Association, Underwriters Laboratories. Just everybody that's in the electrical industry is represented there. And we come to a consensus as what should be in the code and what should not. But also keep in mind, we got 3 things that we're looking at: prevent shock, fire, and arc flash type hazards. So an incident investigation is found in 4.2.6 in NFPA 70B, which is the new maintenance standard that's kind of hitting pretty quick right now. And it's just basically the same that we saw before. But you want to look at a couple of things. First of all, you want to look at any safety incidents that they've had, and you've got to report it. Second one, any malfunctions. So if they've had a malfunction with a piece of equipment that could have caused or even started an arc, or maybe it did something, they need to report that. That anything related to shock, fire, or arcs. And that could be even static. That's one of the problems with combustible dust plants. They don't report static electricity because they don't think it's all that valuable. It's very valuable. In fact, NFPA 77 is the static electricity standard. And NFPA spent the last 4 years doing research into greater how static electricity is causing several fires and explosion and actually deaths in some cases. Operation of protective devices. If you have a malfunction, for example, of a circuit breaker, it could be that the breaker's froze. If it's froze, that means inside they've had an arc in there at some point and it's actually welded the contacts together. This is a dangerous situation. You got a breaker that's really not working, but it's allowing current to go through it. Now I'm going to give you today, a book that I've written. It's on how to make electrical audit. I'm not going to have the time to go over all of that today, but we actually have in this, if you send me an email, I'll just send you the digital audit. Doesn't cost you anything. I'm just doing this for safety folks. But here's one of the checklists we have. For example, we have a checklist in here that gives you whether or not this equipment is approved for hazardous location. And then you can see it's got the OSHA standard, which is the CFR 1910.303. Then you see this standard NFPA 70, that's the National Electrical Code .110.3. Now, when you do this, and let's say you're making an audit of your plant or the situation where you're in, you need to cite these standards, because you're going to come to a situation where a worker is going to say, we don't need to do that. And that does become somewhat of a gap. And that's the reason that there's the 70B has become a standard now, kind of to bridge the gap between safety and maintenance. And so far, it's produced some pretty good results from what my understanding is. But you're going to see this checklist, and it's going to give you all of these standards. The reason you want those standards, if a worker tells you we can't do that, you say you got to do it because that's what the standard says. Don't take that personal. Don't try to fight them over it. It's not worth it. Let them meet the standard and keep the standard. That is, let the code decide. Let the standard decide. Don't get anything personal about it. This is real important to be successful. And as you can see, we got some other situations with that, with hazardous locations. Then you have general requirements for disconnects, receptacles, switches. And as you see, we got all the code references down below that one. Maintenance shops. Now, when you go into the maintenance shop of a lot of plants, that's like their sanctimonious place, but you're going to see a lot of violations in there. And when you do, just write the standard. You're going to do two things. They're going to start reading the codes and standards. They're going to start understanding the purpose behind them. And you're actually doing a training to them in the real world. Make them meet that standard if they can meet it another way than you see. And it still meets the heart of the reasoning behind the standard. So, excuse me, I'm going to give you a case study. Now, this case study was done by NFPA. So NFPA has a research team. I'm part of the research team. I did not do this one, but I've done some similar to this one, but I thought they did a real good job. And so what you had in this one, you had a worker get burned. Her name was, and let me kind of see if I can get over there. Yeah. So the worker was Ellen and Carl. They were electricians at the company. They had an established electrical safety work program. They were asked they did what they were supposed to do. They got energized electrical work permit before they ever started working. They got a job briefing from the supervisor. Carl demonstrated to Ellen, because Ellen was apprentice learning and Carl was the journeyman, and he was telling her how to get around in this equipment. But both Carl and Ellen both dressed out in the arc flash protection that they should have. Ellen, though, when she was working with the equipment, dropped a nut. And when she dropped that nut, it fell down across two buses. Now, this is phase A and phase B. It didn't touch both buses, but she reached around blindly. Now, the first rule of thumb for an electrician is never reach blindly, especially if you know something's energized behind the switchboard, which is what she saw there. Now, I'm using these terms, but you'll see pictures of those. We probably won't get a chance to go through all that today, but there are pictures of how there's chances and opportunities for them to reach blindly. The qualified person knows that's energized and knows not to reach back there blindly. She reached back there blindly, and when she did, she pushed the nut over into the other phase. And so both phases went together. They had an explosion, and it burnt her and Carl, burnt Ellen and Carl in this particular situation. So the question is, if they had all their PPE on, why did they still get burned? So you got to ask yourself, did the overcurrent protection work correctly? Were the calculations of the arc flash done correctly? So when they did an investigation, this is what they found. This were the employer's failures. Poor maintenance of the electrical equipment, 110.3 requires that. And also NFPA 70B gives you how to maintain that equipment. They also found that they didn't conduct a risk assessment like they should. 110.3 H1, which is found in NFPA 70E, is the standard that they should follow. But they had not done an arc fault study on this plant in 16 years. You're required to do a arc flash study every 5 years of the whole system. But if you change out a motor, or you change out equipment, you need to do an arc flash study right then. So one of the things that we actually done, we've taken the formulas in the background, put them together in just something as simple as an Excel spreadsheet for the employer. So what the employer then gets it, they take that. If they have to change out a piece of equipment, they don't have to call us. They can actually use this software or this Excel spreadsheet even, which has the formulas in the background to make one simple change that they need to make. That changes everything in there. We can change the whole thing for them, but it's easier if they can learn to do that on their own. It's better actually for them. And then there was another violation of blind reaching. You don't do blind reaching. And they had never taught on blind reaching or never even discussed it in any of their safety program, which it is a requirement in 110.3H2. They had no provision for any incident investigation in electrical safety program. Come to find out that these near misses had happened several times. This wasn't the first time in blind reaching that this had occurred, and it come to find out that had other faults that people didn't get burned as bad. So Ellen does hold some responsibility for this incident because she did have a certain amount of training, alertness. She should have known that those buses were energized. Apparently she forgot it or was in a hurry or just naturally reached down to get the nut when that happened. Blind reaching, she should have known better. Even as an apprentice, they're taught never to blind reach into a panel, into anything that could possibly be energized. Obstructed view, you never have an obstructed view to something that you know is energized. And this is one of the reasons there's a whole new design of equipment coming out with what's called barriers, so that you are never, the worker is never exposed to energy once they pull the power. For example, let's say a disconnect. Once they shut the disconnect off, still the top part of the disconnect is on. Now you'll have barriers up there so they can work in that panel. They can actually work without the PPE because of that. And we're making a lot of advances in this area, and they're very good. If you get them up front, you're better off than trying to add them later on. Now I want to give you a warning about this. Let me look at my time, see where I'm standing. Okay. Some of this is pretty graphic, and this is an investigation that I made for OSHA several years ago, and made it for some other government sources here. But this is a victim that what happened, he was walking up to replace the HVAC filtering in this attic space area. He grabbed a hold of the gas piping, and his leg was touching the ductwork. When he did, about 120 volts went through his body. And you can see here's where he actually walked. As you can see, I'm showing you here, this is where we measured the voltage difference from the gas piping to the HVAC duct. And he was taking these filters, going to another unit, headed back this direction. He was going to that unit to put the filters in. And you see a burn place. Now, when you're doing an investigation, understand this burn at this voltage level tells us he stayed there for a long period of time. Because normally the lower voltages don't burn you very bad. It's the higher voltages that really burn pretty bad. And the reason for that is voltage is the force of electrons. So it actually, the more voltage you have, the more force of those electrons you have, the more damage you're going to have. Amperage is how long it stays there, or actually the speed of the electron flowing. And so he got a small amount of current, obviously, but it stayed there so long that he had this kind of burn. And as you can see, this spot over here is where some of the tissue actually was taken from this part of the ductwork. You can see a little bit better on this side where it was taken from his leg right there. Now, this is his left leg. We've also got one, I don't know if it's in here or not, but we've got one of his right leg. Yeah, here's the right leg. And you can see it was going from leg to leg across the ductwork. You see where the ductwork was. He was straddled the ductwork, and the energy was actually going across until he grabbed a hold of the gas piping which is above him. Once he grabbed a hold of the gas piping, we actually heard people who heard it going on and they were hearing it actually rattle, because what happened when he grabbed the gas pipe, you could tell he went into muscle freeze. When you go into muscle freeze, he couldn't let go. He had tried to push himself away with the gas piping because it was right there within reach. And that's what happened to him. Let me go back. Here's the gas piping that we're talking about. So the question is, and you got to be asking yourself, and I'm going to move through these slides pretty quick. So if you're investigating this, and I do want to show you something right here, though, before I say this, you got to ask this question. Why did the overcurrent protection, why did the breaker not trip before we had this fatality? There is a reason, and I'm going to show you that reason today. So as you look at this body, and this is common of everyone I've ever investigated and other people that I know that do it, you'll always see this red mark. This means the heart is exploded. If you turn this body over, you're going to see the blood pooling all in the entire back. You'll see it on the buttocks as well. You can see some of that blood pooling going in around the neck area. As you look here, you can see it down here as well. Just to show you some points, but you always see this. When the heart is exploded, you're going to see this red mark. And I've seen them a little bit brighter than this red, but probably because as long as he stayed there and the picture got this, when they finally got the picture, that's probably what happened. Here, just the filters he was going to replace. As you can see, he straddled that right there is where he straddled the bus duct. But if you'll look at the wire, they had actually set the bus duct on top of this is called a BX cable. Now they have MC cable that they've also done the same thing to. Now this was bad thinking on somebody's part. You should never lay a ductwork on top of a cable, because eventually this ductwork moves all the time. It has vibration in it. In fact, there's vibration pieces put in there so that the ductwork will stay together. I'll show you that in just a minute too, but the doing this is a good chance that you can pinch that cable. You're going to eventually, that cable is going to not take the movement so long. It's never made for that. This is a major violation. It should have been covered. And this again shows you kind of where that ductwork was going. And when he grabbed it, this is the direction he came over. He was headed in this direction. And as you can see, that's pretty much what he got into. Overall, that's just another overall picture of it. I want to get you to something else here. Okay, you see this cable? It's everywhere in this attic like this. This is a consistent problem. They had no care for this at all. This cable is again another violation of how they've done this. This cable cannot be exposed to the walkway, and I'm going to show you. This is the walkway. So when you have a bus duct or a HVAC unit in an attic or anything that's electrical in the attic, you have to build a walkway over to it so somebody doesn't walk through the ceiling. But to take the MC cable and run it right over, this is a real problem because nobody sees it much. Even the MC cable, if you look right here, they had it pinched because they had this in such a bind. This is just poor workmanship. It's the only thing you can say. We looked at the HVAC unit to make sure there wasn't a problem there, and we looked at the overcurrent protection. So let me tell you what actually happened. It had nothing to do with any of the overcurrent protection here other than it wasn't installed correctly. It would not have ever happened had they had the cable in the right place and protected. But what we did find out is what's called poor wiring methods, which I just told you about concerning the cable, but also poor bonding. So this is called an expansion joint. Some of them call it a transition point, but you see it in ductwork quite often. When that ductwork gets energized, it's got to take that energy back to its source to trip the breaker, or it won't trip the breaker. This is actually required by the manufacturer. This strap is put in with all of these larger HVAC systems, Even the smaller ones have them now. When you have a transition like this, you've got to bond it together so that it'll trip the breaker. You've actually lost your equipment ground is what you've done when you don't put this in here. The manufacturer knows that. That's the reason they put them inside the equipment so that you can actually use it, and they tell you to use it. This is the way it's supposed to be done. They had a transition point in this system. We saw this young man that got electrocuted. They didn't have it. They didn't have it in any of the transition points. Here's one newly installed, nothing around the transition points. This is not common. This is not uncommon. They'll actually put duct tape, as you can see around here. This is poor workmanship. That's all you can say. So if you see it, just write the standard and tell them they got to meet it. It's just that simple. Everybody's on the same page that way. This is the drawing actually we did for showing how this all occurred, because obviously when you have a wrongful death, you're going to see a ton of lawyers, a lot of government organizations are going to be involved with that. And this is what we actually drew out for them and did an illustration, actually made an illustration so they could understand how it happened. And this is just the path at which it went through him, because the ductwork, and this, as you can see, the ductwork was, this is where the fault was occurring, where the cable was laying on the duct. And then you can see the energy now is going through there. And all he's done is completed the path through the gas piping to the HVAC unit. That's what he's done. He's simply bypassed all of the HVAC, and it went through him before it could ever get to the panel board where the breaker was sitting at. And there was a breaker in this unit, but because of this transition point right here, there's no way it could have gotten there. Now, you want to write, we actually have a list of things for you to write down, and it all comes out. There's no way to get around this. You ask the right questions, and that's one of the reasons when you're doing an investigation, especially if it's your plant or your place of business, even if it's a small incident, ask the right questions. That small incident could be an indicator of something bigger to come. As I said, I've never seen anyone electrocuted that somebody had already not been shocked on that particular environment or in it. So I'm going to move on from all of this. And these are factors of fatality. In his, we had his present voltage was 125. So we did basically used an Ohm's law body of resistance. The peak amperage was running through his body around 1,000 milliamps and around 80 milliamps. And then he had the path through his body that it took. And then there was a certain amount of time that it stayed in there. We estimated that he was probably in this a little over a minute before his body weight actually pulled him off of it, because he couldn't let go. There's no way you could, I didn't show you the pictures, but you can actually see his hands. His hands they're not really burned, but you can tell they're a slight burn inside the hands as well. So there's been studies done on muscle contraction, how much, these are all in milliamps. So 1 to 5 milliamps, for example, your ground fault circuit interrupter that's in your home, at your bathroom sink is made to trip out within 5 to 7 milliamps. If you have a 5 to 7 milliamp fault, it's going to trip out. And but you can go into muscle contraction at between 1 to 5. Let go. This is a threshold where you can't let go. At 10 to 40 milliamps, you can't let go. And by the way, we do a class on overcurrent protection, and there are different levels of ground fault protection, and they're called classes, class A, B, C, and all there are is they're based on the milliamp rating of which one can be used and which one can't. For example, if you have a feeder with a GFI, it's got to be at 100 milliamps. Then you break it on down as it comes maybe to a branch circuit, depending on what it's used for. It could be 5 to 7 milliamps. But this just shows what happens to the human body During the fault with 75 to 100, you go into ventricular fibrillation, heart paralysis starts at 250.300, and then organs begin to burn. You saw that he was getting burned. That's one of the reasons we knew that he had that type of current going through him. We knew then for sure the type burn that he had, we knew that he was going to stay there for a while. There's no way he could get off. Was he'd gone into muscle contraction. He trapped around, his hands literally clamped on to the gas piping. When he first got it, you can tell he tried to grab over it and push himself off with the other hand, and then he really got it. And that's when he couldn't, at that time, it started going through his heart. He was probably enduring it through his legs in the beginning, and he tried to push himself off. You can tell where his hands were. I didn't give you all those pictures, but you can tell where his hands were, and then you know that he went into it because of what the damage it did to his heart. So you're probably wondering, how do they know this current? Well, they got a couple of electrical engineers to try it out and see. That's not true. They didn't do that. These were actually done when several years ago, basically at Sing Sing prison. And these were for prisoners that were on death row, and they were going to electrocute them. And this is how this study actually started. Now, we've come a long way since those days, and other ways to do that without having to use humans. So when you're investigating, this is your outline. You want to see what the scenario is, what has happened, where are they at? You want everything that's around them, what equipment is feeding, what equipment is not feeding. Okay, this thing tells me I have run long enough. So I'm going to tell you this real quick, and then I'm going to hush and ask for questions if you've got any. And then you want to know what the results are. Did the victim get burned? Did the victim get just a slight hit? Did the victim get, is this a fatality? Did they go to the hospital? You know, what kind of results did this occur? Was equipment destroyed? Did the breaker trip? That's feeding this. What breaker feeds this? So in the investigation, you need to find out all those. We got some more ways of doing that. Then the analysis part is where you start putting all of this together, and it kind of builds the storyline for you. That's exactly what NFPA did when they gave you the scenario, the results, investigation, and analysis. They analyzed what the employer's responsibilities were and what the employee's responsibilities were. This is one picture of how, when you look at wire and you see this fault, you know this is a copper, it's what's called a copper notch. That means this copper has seen a short circuit. Doing that, knowing that, kind of helps you to know how the victim got into the circuit, or it also lets you know how a fire occurs. This is one that's called a parallel fault, and this is called a parallel arcing fault, and that's what it looks like. So this is the wire, two wires, and the energy is actually arcing in between them, and this is all insulation that is destroyed. By the way, this picture is in NFPA 921, and 921 tells you how to look at that and determine what happens. That's the reason I want you to know about NFPA 921. All of these pictures, pretty much the same thing. This is one on actually going to a fuse terminal. You got a real problem here that has probably been going on for a while. This picture is also out of 921. This right here is an overload, but torquing is a requirement. And I see this quite often. They don't torque. I can tell you buses that have blown up, they hadn't torqued them in 50 years, haven't checked the torquing on them. Torquing is when you tighten the screws down, because over a period of time, a conductor will get hot and it increases in size and it decreases when it cools down. That eventually causes these screws to move out. There's a lot of research been done in stopping that, but there's no substitute for getting the torquing correct in the beginning. And this is one I'm going to leave you with. This is a welder. Unfortunately, I see this quite often. This is just a violation of the way it's wired up. But as you can see, you got more heat on one leg than you do the other. And this is a problem. This person they did have a fire that started through here. They were very fortunate that it didn't go a long ways, but they did have a fire from this one. There's another one. They got the wrong size wire. This wire right here is for a 50-amp breaker. And we have a size wire here that's designed for a 15-amp breaker. And they've tied them together under a 50-amp breaker. You can't do that. These are just some tests that we've done here on IR test, and that's pretty much it. I'm going to stop with the IR test and see if we've got any questions. Can y'all hear me?
Okay, we have a question.
Is there a website or a way to get an Excel spreadsheet that has all the calculations required for an arc flash study?
Yeah, so you normally buy software for that. However, if you go to NFPA 70E, there's some basic calculations for basic operations. Now, you may have some other instances that may change that calculation, but yeah, they're there. Now, where the formulas are found in the annex. You can see the formulas that they use for doing arc flash calculations. So let me say this. When you're doing an arc flash calculation, there's a little more to it than just arc flash. You have to do what's called fault current as well. And then you have to calculate in the voltage as well. You probably need to have an engineer to help you out with that. Once they kind of get you headed down the right road, somebody can handle that pretty well. The startup of it is that you're probably going to need somebody that's got experience with that. Those formulas are a little bit hard to handle at first, but after you get in them, they're not bad. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, that answers my question.
Another question? I had one, David. Yeah, at the beginning, you were talking about having to report. Who are you reporting to? Who does this information have to go to?
Good question. That's a real good question. So when you're reporting, you report as a part of your electrical safety program. If there's nothing that needs to go, nobody's going to the hospital, nobody's got burned or anything of that nature, you put that as a part of your electrical safety program that you did have this, and this is what you saw. And the reason is they want you to do this. If you start having instances, there's a pattern that will show up pretty quick, and you learn to recognize the patterns, and you know you got a problem coming up. This is the reason that we've seen NFPA 70B, which is the maintenance standard, get so involved. I really think that what's going to happen, and I've already seen this, maintenance people are starting to grab a hold of this, and they're saying, hey, this is going to help us more than be an obstacle to us. Because sometimes they do think safety is an obstacle. But back to the reporting, you report just a normal incident in your place, you report it there. And then, you have to, OSHA reporting still applies to these as well. It depends on several factors there. I think you already know most of those. If the state or the federal government get involved or local governments get involved, then there'll be a certain amount of reporting that they'll want to hear too. And basically, you then open up your books and they can look at it, is what it amounts to. But you want to make sure that no false language gets out there that's not true about what has happened. Most of the time, if the employer is looking as though or this has been my experience, if the employer is being responsible, there's very little recoil on it. But if they're not being responsible, you're going to see a major backlash.
Hey, David.
Yes.
Hey, this is Wayne Jackson. How you doing?
Hey, Wayne.
Having done this for years and tried to incorporate the 3-year rotation for NFPA 70, 70B, and 70E, they're on a 3-year rotation. Most of the people that I do training with have never even heard of 70B. I'm glad it's getting out there.
Yeah, that's a good point. So it did not become a standard officially until last year. Now, we've been teaching it in the QEW program because we knew the value of it and we knew this was going to happen, but we didn't know when. And
Well,
now
but
that,
I think it was with the 2018 revision 70E where they said that, you have to have maintenance requirements, and they basically referenced you either had to go with the OEM manufacturer requirements or 70B. A lot of this old stuff, you didn't have the OEM requirements, so you had to fall back on 70B. But a lot of people didn't know that he was out there.
you're absolutely correct. That's exactly right. And that's still true today. I mean, you don't have the manufacturer specs. The manufacturer may not even be around any longer. So you're going to look at their specs, going to look at their tables, if you will, and it'll give you a ton of information. I've been a real fan of 70B for a long time because I think it's solving problems before we ever have them. Thank you for mentioning that, Wayne.
Any other questions? Well, David, thank you very much for doing this presentation.
Sure.
Stepped up to do it. I hope you are confident. Next time I see you, I would cover the bug, the one that doesn't fall apart when you put it in a microwave or in a dishwasher. Good seeing you.
Well, maybe the next time I can come live. I hate it when I couldn't come live, but we're just really tied up right now. And I would have loved to have done that. I like doing live demonstrations and picking live victims. I mean, but it's a lot of fun. I enjoy it, and we're saving lives. Ultimately, we're saving lives, and people get to go home in one piece. That's real important. So I appreciate what you guys are doing. That's the reason I kind of reach out to you guys to help you more probably than, at least I do it free, than I do for others. So because I think you're a real important part, and you are starting to play a major role in industry now. I'm seeing more and more safety is highly respected, but not just respected. They've become a real part of the plan, whether it's production of, and I sat on committees with large automobile manufacturers, and they really push safety nowadays. And the reason is it is a part of their products being produced and being produced on time. And it saves them a ton of money ultimately. So I'm done. If you got another question, feel free to ask, but okay. All right.
Thank
Do
you,
we,
David. Have a great weekend.
all right. I'm going to sign off, guys.
Okay, thanks,
All right.
David. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Normally I say take a 5-minute break, but there's too many here. Let's take a 10-minute break, get yourself some lunch. Then I'll get into the chapter meeting.
Let me hold that drive, the thumb drive.
Everybody's got their lunch? Great. Now you might as well stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Hey, Wayne, was it good?
Yes, I will. You will join me in your religious traditions, I pray in mind. Lord, we thank you for the opportunity to gather with like-minded individuals to share information and network. We thank you for safe travels for everyone that came, and also for safe travels as we return. We bless the food that we're enjoying to our body's nourishment so that we can serve you and serve our fellow man. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
ASU for allowing us to come on campus and have this meeting. And I'd like to continue the tradition next year. So juniors here, whoever becomes leadership of the student sections, it'll be your responsibility to make sure that we come here next February, 2025. Normally I'd say, is there any members or guests? But let's go around the room today and introduce ourselves. We can start in the very back with our Neptune company representative.
Hi, my name's Ashley Garner. I work at NFPA in Tallahassee. I live in Auburn, so I think I drove before the meeting, but happy to be here. I'm also the wife liaison for the chapter of women safety excellence. So if you're into that, you can sure got. Thank you.
Well, I'm Edward, so you all may already know me, but I'm the safety tech at Kermistan, and I graduated from Bayview a couple months ago, back in August. There it is.
I'm out of Maine, I'm the fire tech out of Kermistan. Been there for about 3 years. I was a fire alarm technician for 7.5 years before I started.
Well, thank you for joining us today. You brought like 4 or 5 members today from the facility, right?
We're all there. Todd and Glenn, I'm also a fire technician. We got 4 plants doing, so it's 1 for each plant. Been there 9 years.
I'm good. I'm the lineman's fire tech.
Greg, also a fire tech from Spain.
My name is Taylor. I'm the global budget.
Shelton, I'm the director of safety for Lions HR at Kansas.
Charlie Bishop. I'm a safety consultant for Lions HR based on Hanson.
Randy Littleton, I just recently retired from Colonial Pipeline Company. I was senior safety specialist there. Still maintain the membership, keep active.
Thank you.
Vincent Scott, safety manager at Kratos Defense in Birmingham.
I'm Sarah Harmon. I'm a junior here at JSU.
Quentin Fritz, I'm the safety programs and risk manager at Nelson Brothers. We're a commercial explosive manufacturer.
I'm Zeke Johnson. I'm also a junior here at JC.
Jackson Davis, also a junior here at JSU.
I'm Wayne Jackson. I'm the Mississippi, Alabama area director currently, former chapter president, and also former chair of this Northeast Alabama section. I live in Heflin over in Cleveland County, so I'm local.
Ron Kerr, I work at BAU as a facility compliance specialist and live in Jacksonville.
I'm Will Yarborough. I am the instructor here, one of the instructors here at JSU for occupational safety and health management.
Again, I'm here. I'm used to name. I'm a junior here, and I'm the secretary of the JSU Justice.
I'm Nolan McCord, I'm a sophomore here.
Timothy Malone, I'm a junior here at JSU.
How's it going, everybody? I'm Connor Norris. I am currently a senior here at Jacksonville State University.
I'm Jackson Sweat. I'm a junior here as well.
I'm Jordan Wise. I'm a senior in safety here.
I'm Jaden Harris, a vice president of the JC chapter here.
I'm Michael Barnett, and I'm a junior here at JSU. I'm Brian Goff. I'm a senior here at JC.
It's great to meet everyone. My name is Justin Sims. I'm the president of the Jacksonville State Student Chapter of the ASSP. I'm a senior here at Jacksonville.
I'm Justin Shepard. I'm the vice president of vertical science for an injury prevention group. I'm also the vice president of the Alabama chapter of the ASSP.
I'm Tom Tonight with the University of Alabama Safe State Program, senior safety consultant, roll tide. I'm a Syracuse graduate. I don't really care. We get crushed because we're an orange now. We used to be an Indian chief, but since we became the orange, we're now crushed on everything we do. So go at you, whatever it is.
Carolina coffee will do.
Yeah, once in a while, we'll get lucky and win. Basketball and lacrosse, that's it. For everything else. Oh, regatta, I'm sorry. Forget about regatta. I'm also the president of the Alabama chapter of the ASSP right now. Any safety shares for anybody? Usually I have one, but I don't have any this month. So any safety shares? West Alabama Tuscaloosa section meeting's gonna be next Friday, if anybody's interested and able to attend it. I think they can actually do Zoom this time, because it's gonna be on campus, so we'll have Zoom available. So if anybody wants to attend, send me an email, I can send you the invite. Alabama chapter meeting next month, we're gonna have Joel Batiste, he's the area director for OSHA now, out of Birmingham, he'll be doing a presentation, OSHA update. When I say OSHA update, that's what everybody has always done. He kind of gets into his experience he's had as an area director, assistant area director, and a coach show. He's basically from the Fort Worth area. They're a little different out there, so he's got some great experiences that he talks about. A little bit more laid back than some of the other area directors we've had good presentations before. The 2024 Region 4 conference this year will be down at Walt Disney World. Yay! At the Wyndham Resort, right next to Disney Springs. If you get an opportunity to go with a great 2-day conference, 1.1 credits you'll get. If you look at the national conference, which will be out in Denver in August, you get 1.7. So it's about the same number of credits, and you need credits for your recertification. So it's a close, fairly close conference for the region that's an actually pretty good conference. Next year will be in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. There is an early bird registration that's still going on. That'll save you $100. This is a free conference in the state of Alabama. 2024 Alabama Construction Safety Conference and Expo is going to be down at the Hyundai Training Center down in Montgomery. It's free. You got to register through the Self Center for Occupational Safety and Health. Registration is open right now. Really well attended. We're almost at 200 attendees so far. Says construction. It's about 60% general industry, 40% construction, unless it's Sunday. If it's Sunday, it's 90% general industry, 10% construction. Because construction's out catching up on everything they couldn't do with the green. So it's gonna be a really good conference. Also be there doing a presentation. Safe Day will be there doing a presentation. A bunch of other companies will be there doing presentations. And it's a good little free, the word is free, conference to go to. You'll get fed Jack biscuits in the morning and probably cold Jack biscuits at lunch.
Are they gonna do a Spanish thing at conferences?
Pardon?
Are we gonna do anything in Spanish?
I believe there's a Spanish
There
track.
needs to be a Spanish track.
I believe there's going to be a Spanish track this year, so we'll have that. Let's see. Training opportunities. Check the website. The University of Alabama OTI Center has a bunch of stuff going on. Right now, Steve Self Center for Occupational Safety and Health doesn't have anything going on because they're getting geared up for the construction conference, which they're the individuals who hold the registration. One thing I will point out, if you have never attended our free monthly webinars, we have a webinar coming up actually the end of this month on the 29th called Lesser Known OSHA Requirements. Oh, you didn't know what's exciting for that? Well, guess what they do? Here's what they are. That'll be next week, 29th is a Thursday, I believe. About an hour long. Randy will be doing the presentation. If you haven't ever gotten an invite for these, let me know and I can send you my invite to attend. We do them for free. 60 to 400 people attend every month. Depends on the what they're talking about. Upcoming events. Membership recognition luncheon to recognize our long-standing members such as Vincent, who's been a member for.
Are you calling me old?
Well, no. You're relatively young, but since you've been 10 years old, you've been an ASSP member, so you're 35, and you've been with us 35 years. Right? I'd also like to bring this up. Vincent is our 2023-2024 Safety Professional of the Year. So congratulations. At this meeting as well. Anybody can attend. If you have long-standing memberships, you'll get a little plaque, or I should say a frame with your certificate in it. If you've been less than 20 years, you'll get a certificate that says 10 years to 15 years. And we will feed you. That's because you're really good lunch. Urban Cookout will be doing the lunch. when the mailings came out, I talked about Dr. Trish Kimmel doing a presentation on fire safety and explosions and so forth. He thought it was next week because they moved the section over in Tuscaloosa from the first Friday till next Friday due to conflicts. So that's why Dr. David Carpenter did today, and I apologize, they weren't the same. It's just because of the last minute change. He will do his presentation in May on what we're gonna do this one. In June, Danny Smith, who works with Safe Start, we're doing a presentation on it's not rocket surgery, it's brain science, and he does a pretty good presentation at the national conference and our governance conference covering this a lot of times. And this is what Wayne and I would like to talk about. Keith Campbell, who is a safety director over at this construction company, really would like to get the northeast section of ASSP start up again. Charlie, who's in HR Lions, Gadsden area, would also like to get involved in that. In order to get this section regoing, we need about 4 or 5 members, and Keith unfortunately is not. Keith here today? No, by chance he didn't make it. Okay. You have to be a member of ASSP to hold an executive committee office, sir, position, which in case of the section will be a chairman and secretary. So we would need 4 or 5 members so that you could fight over who would want to be the chairman, who would want to be the secretary to get this section going. So if you're interested in getting this section going, we'd love to hear from you because we'd like to start it up again. Go ahead, Wayne.
As an area director, one of the things that I'm responsible for is making sure the chapters in our area. There's 3 chapters in Alabama and 2 in Mississippi that I'm responsible for. And we have had to sunset a chapter in southern Mississippi because they did not have any officers and they had not had meetings in a while. We had to sunset the Dothan section this year because they were not having meetings and they did not have officers. The Northeast Alabama section has not had officers or meetings for over 2 years. You are in jeopardy of being sunsetted right now. It's been talked about meeting. I mean, that section's gonna go away. I have a vested interest because I live in this section. I remember this section. I was one of the founding members of this section back in the early 90s. The reason this section got formed is because of JSU. What was the guy a long time ago that used to have the program years ago at night? I can't remember. Fred.
Yeah.
The reason we were able to get a section here is because in order to show interest, we had to have attendance at meetings. And so what we would do is we would go up to the Village Inn. Anybody remember Village Inn? Fred would bring his whole class up there of 25 students, and 5 or 6 of us safety people locally would get up there. We'd have 30 people at Village Inn, we'd eat supper, and we'd have a meeting. We did that for 6 months in a row, and that showed ASSP and the chapter in Birmingham that we were interested enough to have a section. So because of the JSU students and what Fred did for us, that we actually have that section. Ron was real active in that section with me for years and years and years. And Steve Cheatwood and I kept that thing going forever. Steve is now retired. Mark Knighton, some of you may know Mark, he kept us keep it going. Charity Harris, who's now with Ocean, and she was at Maverick Steel, was very instrumental in keeping it going for a while. The requirements for this section, if I looked at the bylaws, you have to have a president and a secretary and 3 board members. So there's 5 positions that you have to keep this section going. So if you guys are interested in doing that, keeping up and having meetings in this area, I think the requirement according to the bylaws now is you have to have bi-monthly meetings. But the bylaws can be changed if you wanted to go like to a quarterly meeting, you're 4 times a year instead of doing 6 times a year. You just simply have to change the bylaws and vote. That's all you have to do. But if you want to keep this section going, it's very, very paramount that we get something done here in the next few weeks. Because like I say right now, Jerry Galanka has beaten me to death about sunsetting this chapter. And I said, please wait till after the 16th, because we are having a meeting at JSU and we'll have some local folks there. So
Are the students in the student
no,
section?
they're in the student section. There is a student section which is totally separate. This is us grown-up folks. The ones like you and me that are have no hair of gray.
Once they graduate,
Once you graduate, those of you guys that are seniors, if you get a job, I think if I remember right, the section is Cherokee County, Etowah County, Cleveland County, Clay County, Randolph County, and Calhoun County. There's several counties. If you live in those areas or work in those areas, and you designate Northeast Alabama section as your designation, you can be a part of the section as well as be a part of the Alabama chapter. And so that's really what we need to do, is we need to decide, do we want a section in Northeast Alabama or do we not? That's the question. And like I say, I'm here to represent Region 4 as the area director. And like I say, Jerry Locker, who's in charge of membership for national, because we've not filed any tax documents in the last 2 years. That's the reason we have to sunset, is because of IRS requirements. You have to report financials every year to national so they can file taxes on behalf of your section. So that's the key. So that's really what we're up against.
And all finances are really through the chapter.
The
So
student
we'll
chapter.
handle that. You really won't have to worry about any of that stuff. You know, we'll pay for lunches if we have lunches, so you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. And you can change the bylaws. What was it, 5 on
It's
the,
filed.
you can change it to 2, having the chairman.
Well, you have to have a board, so it's.
Yeah.
The requirement, I think, from national is you have 2 officers, a president, at least a president and a secretary, and then three board members other than that are members of the chapter.
And requirements is 4 times a year now instead of having 6 or 12.
Yeah, you don't
So-
have to have a meeting every month, like I said, whatever your bylaws say, you just go by your bylaws.
Yeah, you can just rechange your bylaws
Rechange the
to
bylaws.
quarterly.
whatever you do,
Yeah.
However you feel.
So if you're
I'll leave
interested,
it up to you guys to decide, you know, I don't want to see this thing go away. Like I said, I'm on the county members, and trying to keep this thing going for years over here. When I became a chapter officer and then a region officer, you know, I have responsibilities there that I can't run the chapter. Right, besides that, I'm retired anyway, so, you know, I'm actually not working in safety anymore, on a full-time basis. I do a little bit of consulting work on the side. But, my area directorship is up at the end of June, and I'm not running again. Randy is running.
unopposed, yeah.
Unopposed, Randy, who was former president. I said, if Randy runs, I'm not running again. I could actually have run again and for another 3-year term. It's supposed to be a one and done 3-year term, but I actually started, because somebody else didn't do it, I started in November 2.5 years ago. So I didn't have a full 3-year term, so they were gonna allow me to run again if I wanted to. And I said, no, I'm retired. I wanna, and if you guys get the section going, I'll be back at the end of June, after my time's over, and I'll try to get to all the meetings and try to support the sections in here, because I live here. That's all I got to say. I just want to make sure, if you guys want to do it, you just need to let your president know.
And Wayne,
And
either of us, let us know, because we're interested in keeping
we
the
want to
section
keep it
going.
if we can. We don't want it to sunset.
And again, you don't have to meet tomorrow. You can set up a meeting for a couple months down the road. Just let us know you want to do it.
Well,
Uh,
I don't know if we got a couple of minutes.
Well,
They're being honest because of the federal tax stuff. They wanted to do it at the end of last year.
For sections in general, if we're thinking, I would think about student sections, but what do we need to do to help all sections?
Well, the sections are part of the chapter, and as long as they have leadership and as long as they're having meetings, just show up and support them. Right now, I don't know if the students know about this, but right now there are 3 student sections in our chapter. There's the Auburn University student section, there's the UAB student section, and the JSU student section. And we have 3 sections right now in the quote unquote adult world, in the regular section. That's the Tuscaloosa East Alabama section, West Alabama section. There's the Montgomery Auburn section that meets down in Montgomery and the Auburn area. And then there's this section. So they kind of correspond to the student sections, but not really, because of the UAB, not being in Tuscaloosa, but the meetings, they have meetings in Tuscaloosa, and at least, are they meeting monthly now? Are they meeting?
no, they meet every
It's every
2 to 3 months.
Every 2 months.
We're trying to do 4 meetings a
Yeah,
year.
Auburn, Montgomery does the same thing. They try to be either Auburn or Montgomery 4 to 6 times a year and have a program.
Yeah.
And then that's really what we would like to have here. What that does is that allows, since our chapter is so big, you know, it allows people to come to a local meeting rather than having to drive to Birmingham. You know, you can have it here in Anniston or Gadsden, somewhere in this local area. You know, so you know, you're more likely to be able to come because it's close.
I think that's part of
That's the reason we have sex.
what the ASSP chapter needs to do is to help meet your guys' needs. So if you have a section,
Yeah.
there are tools that the chapter can share, those newsletters and things, we can give you guys access to that kind of stuff. You can have your own newsletters, you can have your own information, and I can help set things up as secretary for the chapter.
And if I remember right, like the chapter bylaws were written, whoever's the president of your section is also on the chapter executive committee. Is that right?
That's correct, yes. Yeah, the executive committee.
So you actually have chapter government representation of the area as well.
And you get, for anybody who has ASP or CSP, CHML,
You actually get.
CIH, you get continuing education credits.
Education credits for being a chapter officer.
Which is-
section officer.
0.1 per meeting, so today we got 0.1. Why is that important? Well, the national conference used to give you 2.5 CEUs per event. Because the vendors pay for the national conference, and that's the reason why they have a national conference, they cut out time, and so you gotta go to the vendor area. When they cut the time off the vendor area, they take away CEUs, now you get 1.7. You figure it out, you're losing 4 credits every 5 years. You need 25 for recertification. So we have to make it up through section meetings, chapter meetings, the free conference down in Hyundai, the governor's conference for the state of Alabama, the Region 4 conference, that's where you'll be able to make up your CEUs.
Yeah, and also too, if you are a section officer or a chapter officer, there's actually recertification points for
Yes.
holding that leadership position as well.
As well, yep. So,
There are a lot of reasons to be a part of this organization, other than learning what you learn.
so Charlie, step forward, be chairman now.
Sure.
You want to terrorize somebody, make them secretary? And then get the ball rolling for a meeting. I can do a walking surfaces presentation for your first meeting. I can be on. Okay.
We'd love to have, like I say, all you guys that are seniors, you're gonna get a free membership next year. We'd love to have you, when you get that free membership. Designate the Northeast Alabama section as part of the Alabama chapter that you belong to.
Yeah.
You can have both chapter membership and section membership in the area that you live or work. So if you work in those areas or live in those areas, you can be a part of this area. That's in this section.
Outside of the student chapter here, can us seniors participate? with-
Oh, absolutely, and that's what we'd love to do, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, you can hold joint meetings if you need to do that. Whenever the student section is meeting, if the section wants to come and call back their meeting for 6 months or a year, so you get it off the ground, you know, meet together.
That's actually good because.
It's really ideal to do it that way. Yeah, like I said, that's how we got it started.
We meet like every, what, 2 weeks?
Yes, sir.
And that's just for us that we're getting it going and they've already got events lined up. We've got UAB coming to teach, to talk about the industrial hygiene program. That our meetings are typically every other Tuesday at 11 o'clock, right? 11 to 12:30 in this room. So, they could provide y'all with the schedule.
So like I said, if the student section wants to help get this thing going again, like they did the first time, I think that's a good opportunity for you guys to have something that you can, particularly you seniors can jump right into, you know, in 3 months when you graduate.
So in April, when we do the membership recognition, all the sections will get credit for that, whether you attend or not. You'll get credit if you attend, obviously. If you don't, still it will be considered a meeting for those who attend. So if 3 students from the student section show up, that's a meeting for y'all with them. Also feed you too, by the way.
But I like that idea of doing, you know, that makes perfect sense to me.
Works.
Thank you.
Works.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great.
And as you know, the problem that we had was we tried breakfast meetings and we could get 3 or 4 people to come. We would try lunchtime meetings, we could get 3 or 4 people to come. We would try dinner meetings, we could get 3 or 4 people to come. So we tried meeting all different times, all different days of the week. And for some reason, people just were not coming to the meetings. Now, there's been many a day that Steve Cheapwood and I would show up at Shawnee's on Friday morning for a meeting, but with the 2 of us. You know, we would be the meeting. So we'd eat breakfast, talk a little bit and leave. And we did that for a year, almost a year there. So we didn't have a lot of. Well, we also had, some joint meetings with the CHML folks, so we had several folks in the area here.
We used to have meetings with the AHA.
And they,
Right down the hill, and you know, we talk about UAV in their student section. There's only 2 there, and they are uninvolved.
Yeah.
This program's just gone down, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Auburn's doing great, JSU is doing great. For some reason, UAV's, you know, slid down to, kind of what the University of Cincinnati was at one time. Used to be a great program then.
Well, yeah, with him, we've started a new relationship with them, kind of renewed that with, when was it? Last year, we had 3 students actually, you know, once they got their degree from here, they're now, going and getting their master's in industrial hygiene. So, of course, you know, the states or what is it, the CDC or NIOSH gives them that scholarship. So now we've already got 3 or 4 seniors lined up to do the same thing this, you know, this fall.
Go back up.
Yeah, so it's about to go back up.
Those are student members.
Yeah, hopefully
Social
they
hygiene is kind of falling down.
The reason that we had a student section in UAB was because they actually had 2 programs. They had
Yeah.
public health program, you know, with the CIH and the occupational nursing program, and then they also had the online master's and doctor program, you know, in safety.
It's a,
So we had 2 different feeder things that we could put into that group for that one. A natural place to put it was in UAB.
Well, and that's why, when I was at UAB, that was part of the problem is that the safety engineering side of it was just all professionals who, if they were members of the full chapter of 7 students. So it was like, and the IH program was bringing in 3-4 people a year. Which is not that many people. I mean, now their recruitment numbers are going up. It's like you were saying, there's less and less programs for IH.
IH just kind
And
of
more and
slid
more
down, it's become more EHS. You know, everybody wants to be EHS, EHS, so you don't see industrial hygienist, pure industrial hygienist, and you see EHS. Yeah. Thank you, JSU, for inviting us.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed the meeting. I enjoyed it. Glad to meet y'all. Meeting's adjourned. Please take leftovers. I have these leftovers every weekend. Actually cooking something on the weekend. I do have a girl that hasn't seen cubes in a long time. Thanks for coming and having me. You were mentioning that. So.